Hello, friends. Welcome back to Trending. Today is Thursday, May 23rd, about 9:40 as we're recording this morning. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning. How's it going?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
I'm all right. Is it really May 23rd?
Yeah.
Man,
Isn't that crazy?
it's crazy.
It's, cliche. Time's going fast.
That's
Summer's
right.
here. Today's my girl's last day of school. A lot of
Nice.
people, I think, are kind of either already done or wrapping up the next few days. So it's kind of fun. There's just a buzz in the air, you know?
Yeah. Do you guys
Yeah.
look forward to summer with the girls, or do you I don't know, is it like dread and we gotta find stuff to do now?
I think we feel the tension to find something to keep them busy, but
Yeah.
I think it'll be a fun time. They're
Good.
at an age where it's difficult, but it's fun, you know.
Yeah.
So it'll be good.
All right.
How about you?
We've got plenty going on, man. So my kids are a little older than yours.
Yes.
So and they can kind of wake up on their own, do their own stuff. But we got a mission trip. First we have camp, so we got a mission
Yes.
trip, and then a little vacation. And next thing you know, hockey tryouts. You know,
Nice.
so that's the way it's gonna go.
Nice. Okay. Well, speaking of end of school, grad season, summer's coming.
Yes.
There's been a lot in the news this past week, which I'll give people a little heads. Like, we're going to talk about some of the graduation speeches that have been going around.
Right.
But you and I try to handle this well. Like, it's stuff that's in the news. We're not trying to be salacious. We're not gonna.
Yeah.
There's not gonna be some hot take.
No.
So, but that's where we're going this morning.
Yes.
So the Harrison Bucker thing was big, like last week. The
Yes.
Jerry Seinfeld thing at Duke, when there's a kind of some protesting that interrupted his speech and people walked out. So it's this thing of grad speeches, grad season, commencement addresses, commencement services. That's kind of in the air. Kind of a lot of controversy.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you. I'm not really interested in talking about what Harrison Bucker got right or wrong. People watching. Some people probably love what he said. Some people probably hate what he said.
You're right.
So I don't really have a desire to say whether he was right or wrong or whatever. But
Yeah.
just the idea of commencement addresses, the idea of having a guest come in and say something that
Right.
is gonna get headlines, and it's just a weird thing. I think that was kind of what you were kind of getting at. So
Yeah, and it's this time of year where you start to see all these clips from many different graduation ceremonies, and then of course we had, because of students protesting, they canceled commencements.
Yeah, right,
And so I think it kind of highlighted it, elevated the idea even more. But it just got me thinking. I don't remember who shared at my graduations,
Yeah.
the guest, person. And I just think this is such an odd cultural thing.
yes,
Right. You just think through the mechanics of it all. We're going to have all the grads and all the, administration of a college get dressed up in weird clothing.
right,
Right.
Yeah.
And
very flattering. Robes.
yes. And we're like, well, what are we going to do when everyone's here? Oh, we have to give diplomas, right? And the president probably needs to share some sort of a remark about the school year.
Yeah.
Represent the college, let them know that they made a good decision by investing lots of money to come to
Yes.
this institution. But then along the way, we're like, what we need? You know what this thing needs? This
Yeah.
needs someone that is not affiliated with this school, probably,
right,
to get an honorary doctorate degree,
Yes.
to give a 10-minute talk.
right.
It's the weirdest thing. It reminds me of some of the weird stuff we do, like a national anthem before a sporting event.
Yeah.
But we don't do it for a play performance.
Right, right.
So who decided along the way, what this thing needs before we have a tip off? We need to have the Star Spangled Banner.
It's normal some places, but not others. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
who decided it? Who's perpetuating it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do we just struggle through it? Anyways, it's just an interesting phenomenon. And then now with social media,
Yeah.
we take clips and sound bites from these things. We post them in streams, and people respond. The outrage machine on both sides
Yes.
gets a chance to kind of batter it, properly.
Yeah.
And then, it's summer break now.
Yeah. Right.
What's the next thing to get outraged about?
Yes. Maybe we can
just
get
strange.
more
Yeah.
into the outrage thing. But I think what an unfortunate thing is, I don't know if college presidents or whatever committee decides who's going to come.
Right.
It almost seems like it's become this thing where they want to be in the news, or they want to brag about who they got. Or there's kind of this weird pressure of we need to have our college out there. So let's bring in someone
Right.
big, which on one hand, I get that. But a bummer to me is it takes away from the students, right?
Yeah.
These students have been working for 12 years, 4 years, 8 years, whatever. And then for these kids who are at the Benedictine or at Duke or wherever, the students are the second or third thing people are talking about.
Yeah.
It's the commencement addresser who said something
Ah.
kind of sparked. It's just a bummer for the students, I think.
It's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this thing's supposed to be about the student, but it's also the institution. But then
Yeah.
also now we're putting this third party, now we're going to prop this person up.
Well, like you mentioned, it's
Right.
usually not an academic. It's a kicker or a comedian or something similar. Like what's this all about? So,
I mean, sometimes political. I mean, there's graduation, commencement services everywhere. You know, there's a bunch of them, and we don't get to see them all.
Yep.
And so probably some are more heartfelt, probably some more connected to that senior class or not.
Yeah.
But the standard form seems to be, let's get some stranger, someone who might just tangibly be connected to this institution to come in.
Right.
But that's where the fun begins.
Yeah.
Because as Charles Duhigg in his new book, Super Communicators, says, every conversation is a negotiation. Now, most conversations and negotiations are easy, right? Yeah. Like even our Thursday morning conversation that you and I have before trending starts. Like, okay, do you want to do this thing?
Yeah.
When do you want to do this thing?
Right.
What do you want to talk about? Like, there's a negotiation that goes on.
Sure.
And because I think you and I want to we're friends and we like each other, we usually yield to the other person.
Yeah.
Like, we've never had once in trending lore where there's been like, over my dead body, we're talking about this. And the other person's like, fine, I'll just like struggle through it. But it's easy. But there's like a give and take and there's like a settling, right?
Yeah.
So, these colleges, they get like a Harrison Butker. Like you get to do the commencement speech.
Yeah.
And then inside, there's like now this negotiation. What do I say? What do I not say?
Yeah.
How do I say it? And what's my purpose of saying this thing?
Yeah.
And all that begins to swirl around. And I don't know why it is, but when someone who begins to say some remarks like, I think we could all agree that Butker's speech was provocative because it seemed to be out of place for 480 graduating seniors at Bennington College, right? It seemed like, I mean, he's a devoted Catholic. He's kind of got like more of a conservative Catholic background.
Yeah,
many people agree with him on those conclusions.
Yeah,
to have that conversation elsewhere, probably more suited.
Yeah.
But for like the females who were in that graduating class who like worked hard to get a degree, only to be implored, this is not really like the main thing. The main thing is, motherhood someday and probably not working as you do so. Like it's kind of interesting. So he had to do that negotiation inside, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know why. But for someone to do something like he did, it creates all of this affirmation, right? Because he said what he wanted to say, and he wasn't going to back down. And it didn't matter if it was negatively looked at; he was just going to say it. It just reminded me. So I read this book by a guy named Adam Kotsko.
Okay,
great last name. When I first heard it, I thought, "Is
Costco?
This it's not like Costco, but it's like Kotsko." Okay. Anyways. Nice. The first time I heard, I thought it was a made-up name. I'm like, okay, no, but it's a real name, so like, no shame for that name. But like, he wrote a book called "Why We Love Sociopaths." Like people who either they don't see or they don't care about cultural norms, and they buck the system. And like in a life where we have to kind of stay in the lane, pay our taxes on time. Don't bring up certain topics at dinner because it could be rude. Like for whatever reason, we have this amazement of people who say, "No, I'm not going to abide by those rules." Like, and he mentions like a lot of them in like late modern television movies, like Jason Bourne, or the guy on Mad Men who kind of just did whatever he wanted. Didn't matter what. He's kind of come in and just like say whatever he wanted to say. Like why do we? I can kind of throw Harrison Butker. I'm not calling him a sociopath, but like he kind of had like this behavior, like I got a chance to speak. Yeah, this is what I'm gonna say, and just kind of let the chips fall. I think some people were like, that's the guy. Like that. That's the guy that I admire because he doesn't just fall in line. So I think that's somehow going on in this negotiation of what should we say, what we should not say. Is it a risk to say this, or should I kind of lay up and do the typical pattern of a commencement speech, which is like lighthearted platitudes, to encourage people to enter into the workforce and enter into the next phase of their young adult life, right? But he said, I've got a thing to say and I'm going to say it, whether it's appropriate or not, or if it's suitable for the situation or not. I've got a truth to tell, and I want to say it and just let the chips fall where they may. I think sometimes that's kind of operating in the background now, and then we begin to chatter whether that was wise or not for this certain occasion. I don't know. That's the only thing I think about.
As always, there's like a lot of I think there's a lot of lessons we can pull from this.
Right.
So you briefly mentioned like the whole outrage culture thing. Like I've heard you say before, like something that happens at one school in Kansas doesn't need to be national news or international news, or like we tend to look for things that either we love or we hate. And we're going to talk about it, and we're going to get super angry, and like we're in that area where that's just what people do.
Right.
So we can talk about that. I think what you just said is wise. Like, what should we communicate? What's proper communication? Where should we communicate? There's a lot of things we could learn. So again, I always come back to like, most people watching probably aren't going to give a commencement address, probably. Yeah. But this is relevant to all of us, I think. Right. So for all of us, what are some kind of top shelf lessons, or do you have a Bible parallel? What's kind of top of mind for you?
So I think we're always negotiating within like, what should I say and what should I not say? Yeah. Right. Because I think there are moments where we're like, no, like this thing's not talked about and we need to address it. Yeah. Or this thing's misunderstood, and let me try to clarify it, because I think it's an important thing. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes people just like to say stuff to get, a reaction from people. And so, and is all that appropriate? That's, up for the, the person who's communicating. But something, you and I both have communication degrees. Yeah. Like one of the, tried and true principles of communication is irreversible. Mm-hmm. Like you can't quite take back, you can't walk back stuff. Yeah. After it's said completely. Mm-hmm. Like you might be able to like double down on it. You might be able to soften it. Mm-hmm. You might be able to employ some of, people who support you to come around and support what you say, to make it sound like it wasn't so crazy because all of us, agree with this person or that person. And so I just think that we have to go through a process of saying, is this thing productive? Even if it's going to be, if it's going to be combative, is it still worth saying? Mm-hmm. Or do I need to grow in discerning and understanding what should be said, how should be said, all those things? Because once it's said, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? Like it's there. So I look at Paul as maybe an example of this in the New Testament. Okay. Galatians is one of the first New Testament letters chronologically, and it's a spicy letter. I mean, if you we had at the time of this recording, we had a funny moment on our staff prayer on Tuesday. We read through Galatians 5, where like some locker room humor from Paul is said, and I just felt so bad for the person whose turn it was to read that verse, because they had to talk about it, right? Yes, they had to like say it, and it was kind of like this interesting moment, as we were trying to pray through Galatians 5. But in Galatians, you've got, Paul frustrated that he thinks an alternative gospel has been preached, and he thinks it should be condemned. He talks about his confrontation with Peter because he felt like Peter was in error. I mean, one of these heralds of the church, like Paul's like having a throwdown with him, right? And then he's got some of this, pointed humor, some sharp comments towards his those he opposes at the very end, right? So this is kind of like young, boisterous, like principle-driven Paul. Yeah. And we got to say it, no matter what, right? And then like, I don't know, some guys and I were like studying Philippians on Wednesday mornings. Yeah. And, Paul's got this interesting tone in the first chapter where he talks about maybe the intent behind somebody preaching. He even like concludes like if someone is like preaching the gospel like on selfish terms, like he's kind of come to a place of contentment. Even it's not the best, right, but he's content because the message is getting out. And I think that we could say like there's been some growth within this guy, or some change. Yeah, you can determine if it's growth or not, but it's certainly a change in behavior from earlier Paul to later Paul, and maybe he's even grappling with, how do you say things? When is it appropriate? And what would be best for a given hour? And he's got that great run in 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind. Like all that stuff should facet our communication skills and habits too. And so maybe he's just discovering, listen, we should defend the gospel. I mean, everywhere Paul went, there was upheaval. I just love that famous line that N.T. Wright said, everywhere Paul went, a riot broke out. Everywhere I go as an Anglican bishop, they serve tea. I mean, come on, like anywhere he went, like he was a controversial figure. Yeah. But this is the same guy who also said we should strive to live a quiet life. Right, right. So a complex individual. I think he knows that you have to say the hard stuff, even if it's hard to say, even if it like there's some consequences in the background. Yeah. But I think he's also saying like we have to also build up the body of Christ and be the encouraging voice. Yeah. And do everything without grumbling or complaining. Right. Like so this guy's very complicated. But I think what we see is Paul, testing the edges of what it means to be a human and communicate. And he's trying to, allow Jesus to be the center of that. And I think he's trying to make some strides and to grow in some certain ways so that he's not just like lighting fires everywhere. Yeah. Because it's fun. I just don't think that would be his personality.
Yeah.
He's not perfect,
Yeah.
but he's certainly someone that we admire and that we learn from as we try to have a growing Christian life.
Yeah. That's good. I don't want to geek out too much on communication theory since we're communication guys. This is interesting to me. I don't want to bore people. Yeah. But off screen, you've got a big book about Paul. You've got a bunch of handouts. But you've been doing a lot of study about Paul, so this is kind of fresh. So that's great. Yeah. I never thought about doing like a communication analysis of Paul, but I think it's interesting. Yeah. So I think a lot of people would say Paul definitely tailored his message to his audience.
Right.
So like Galatians, Ephesians, like every book is different, and a lot of people would say it's because he was speaking to different people.
Right.
But what I heard you say is it's probably that, but it's also maybe the maturity of Paul maybe changed how he communicated. So was it audience or was it Paul's maturity? Both, and how can we learn from that?
I think it certainly could be both. Yeah, I think Paul's constantly persuading, and I think that he knows that certain persuasion is important at certain times.
Yeah.
Because even like the Corinthians, they critiqued him. They said that he's bold in his letters, but he's also timid in person. Like, right. Is this the same guy? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Why are you so bold in your letters? Kind of like, why is somebody bold in a tweet, but they're kind of sheepish in, the meeting, in the boardroom.
Right.
I think that we read the room. I think we want to be heard and understood.
Yeah.
And I think there are just some who, our world would be better if they said, what would be the wise thing in this moment?
Yeah.
And what would I not be embarrassed by? Like if someone fossilized this comment I made, like, remember Time Hop? Like, and like how like Time Hop would remind you what you tweeted or Facebooked 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, could I like not be like, would I be embarrassed by this 3 years from now?
Yeah.
That I put this out into the world.
Yeah.
Or would I still stand by it? It's kind of like Nietzsche, not a Christian, but I think he had some helpful things to say. He called it the eternal now.
Yeah.
Like if Harrison Buck or Jerry Seinfeld had to do that commencement exercise speech 100 times in a row, would they do the same thing?
Yeah.
Nietzsche's like, do some pre-meditation on it.
Yeah.
Like, would you make this decision if you like the Groundhog Day effect? You had to do this 100 times in a row. If you wouldn't, you might want to reconsider because this one time means a whole lot.
Yeah.
And so it might take just a little bit more discernment before we, launch something into the social universe.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. I'll try to. I have one more thing I wanted to throw at you, Todd,
sure.
And we'll try to wrap it up quickly here. But I wonder. Again, I don't know, but I kind of wonder if you ask Harrison Bucker and Jerry Seinfeld, would you do it 100 times? They might both say yes.
Yeah.
Like there's some people and some things that even if it's controversial, even if it ruffles some others, they're going to do it because that's just who they are. That's a belief they hold, and they're going to keep doing it.
Right.
So there's part of me that's like, I think obviously people who are on a stage have responsibility for what they say.
Right.
Definitely. Speaking of communication, we also have a responsibility of how we take it, right?
Yes, you're right.
And we have a responsibility of who we elevate and what we pay attention to. Like kind of what I said earlier about the outrage culture. Part of this is on us we're looking for people to get mad at.
Yeah,
right?
You're right.
So we talked about kind of the communicator side of things. What about if you're on the listening or the receiving end, what advice can we learn from this situation?
Yeah. I mean, maybe you're like Johnny on the spot. Patrick Mahomes' reply was probably pretty healthy.
Yeah.
He's got to live with this guy, and he's known this guy. He doesn't know Harrison Bucket for this speech.
Right.
He's actually seen him in the highs and lows of life, and he took a great position, I think. He said, I don't necessarily agree with some of the things he said, but man, the content of his character that I've seen day in and day out, like I've seen it. And so he stands by him. I think that was a great negotiation of something. And I think that it's okay for us to disagree and to do so very peacefully. The philosophers call it epistemic humility. I think we should, if we disagree, we could also say, but I don't know much. But this is kind of what I know now. This is what I would say. And so I think that we could also take that stance and be curious, not judgmental, get a little lassoism in the midst of all this stuff. So I just wonder where this is coming from. And I just wonder how Butker or Seinfeld or any of these guys came to this conclusion. Maybe it's worth slowing down a little bit and asking some further questions. But I think we can also say, like, I just think differently. Last Sunday, one of our congregation members and I, we got into a conversation about a doctrine, and we disagree. And we high-fived after it was over, and it was fine.
Right.
Because I think we assimilated it wasn't an essential.
Right.
Maybe when something is essential, I think you can turn up the heat because it means something. It's worth something because there's people attached to it that might need you to stand up for them and for that idea. But if something is a non-essential, good grief, let's agree to disagree and have a bowl of Cheetos. Just go from there.
I think especially this year, election year, it's just everything's about to explode. Everybody just cool down, calm down. Everything's okay.
Do you remember that saying, take a chill pill?
Yes, take a chill pill. I read something the other day that was like, we need to bring back the insult, take a hike. Remember when people, that was like the meanest thing you could say to someone is take a hike?
Yeah.
That's actually pretty good advice.
Yeah.
If you're upset, maybe just go walk around for a little bit. That might be good, actually be good advice.
Yeah.
Take a hike.
Yeah. That's funny.
Okay. All right. Well, any closing thoughts as we wrap up today?
I mean, not closing thoughts. Obviously, this is not the end of the matter. Just the commentary. We keep on thinking, we keep discussing, and hopefully keep learning.
Yeah.
But we're always going to communicate. I think they said 70% of our communication is even nonverbal.
Yep.
Like we're just communicating beings. And so we should grow in the grace of how we communicate. And then, as you've said, I think it's an important point, the grace in receiving it in a more productive way.
Yeah.
And even disagreeing in a very productive way.
Yep.
I think would be helpful for the long run.
Yeah. And wouldn't it be nice if the church and our church could lead the way in that?
Man, that'd be good news.
Right now, that's just, I ache for people who follow Jesus and are good examples of this. So I hope that I'm a good example. I hope you are. I hope we are.
Yeah.
Must be those kind of people.
I got this advice along the way. I think it's a spiritual practice. Say you're right 5 times a day.
Yeah.
Say,
you're right.
You know what? You're right.
I like that. Let's just knock them all out right now. You're right.
There needs to be like a you're right emoji. So that I could count to. I don't know. Maybe there's one out there.
I like it.
Anyways.
I like it. All right. Well, as always, thanks so much for you watching and listening. We hope to see you on Sunday. We'll be back here next week. So
sounds good.
Thanks for watching. See you later.
Yeah, see you next time.